We begin this morning with this deepening rift between President Trump and Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelenskyy, with the U.S. president denouncing Zelenskyy as a dictator and accusing him of duping America into providing billions of dollars in assistance.
A dictator without elections. Zelenskyy better move fast or he's not going to have a country left. Got to move fast because that war is going in the wrong direction.
Now, prior to those comments, Zelenskyy said Trump appeared to be operating in a Russian-created, quote, disinformation space after Trump blamed Ukraine for starting the war with Russia. But speaking aboard Air Force One yesterday, the president said he trusts Moscow wants to see the war end.
Do you trust the Russians to negotiate in good faith going forward? Do you trust them?
I do. I think the Russians want to see the war end, and I do. I really do. But I think they have the cards a little bit because, you know, they've taken a lot of territory.
Now, all this comes as the fighting in Ukraine rages on, with Russia launching more than 160 drones and around 14 missiles in its latest aerial attack overnight. We have team coverage on this for you this morning. Our Natalie Brand is keeping track of things at the White House, and CBS News senior foreign correspondent Elizabeth Palmer is following international reaction from our London bureau. Let's start with Natalie at the White House. Natalie, what is the president saying about Ukraine's use of U.S. aid money, and how is he criticizing Zelenskyy as a leader?
Yeah, Errol, in this Truth Social post in which President Trump calls Zelenskyy a dictator without election, he goes on to claim that Ukraine talked the United States into $350 billion of aid to Ukraine to fight a war that President Trump says couldn't be won. Well, CBS News and our Confirmed team, we looked into the numbers, and according to the U.S. government's Ukraine Oversight Group, which has been tracking the funding online, the U.S. funding totals around or nearly $183 billion. So President Trump inflated that number. His number was inaccurate. We also found that Congress appropriated nearly $175 billion through several, as you remember, Ukraine supplemental bills that passed with bipartisan support. This was funding for economic, humanitarian, and military assistance. Furthermore, a Council on Foreign Relations report found that not all of the funding went directly to Ukraine's government. It found around $106 billion did, but some of the funding actually went to American factories and workers to produce some of the weapons that we were sending or that we were drawing down to replenish the U.S. stockpile from the Pentagon.
Really useful to look into those numbers. Natalie, thank you. Let's cross now to Elizabeth Palmer in London for more on the international reaction. Liz, there are so many questions as to why President Trump is calling President Zelenskyy a dictator. Fact check that for us compared to President Putin.
Well, it seems that President Trump is referring to the fact that there haven't been elections in Ukraine, even though there were supposed to be, under a normal rotation, elections last spring. But martial law has been declared in Ukraine, of course, because it's in the middle of a war. And under Ukrainian law, elections are suspended while martial law is in effect. From there, so Zelenskyy is clearly a war leader, but to go from there to calling him a dictator is a great leap. I think experts would agree there's a lot more evidence, if you like, that President Putin is a dictator or has made dictatorial policies. But one thing that's really striking in all the tweets and the statements coming from Donald Trump is there is not a single word of criticism of President Putin, even though he invaded Ukraine and started the war.
And so, Liz, connecting all those dots, how will the Kremlin be viewing all this?
Well, probably a great delight. It does look as if the cards are all breaking in Putin's favor, thanks to Donald Trump. A case in point, at the end of the meetings earlier this week between the Russian and U.S. advance parties, if you like, to discuss how peace negotiations might take place, not only was Ukraine sidelined, but they emerged from that meeting seemingly having agreed that elections have to take place in Ukraine before a final peace negotiation. It's not difficult to imagine that there would be a concerted Russian attempt, or perhaps even Russian-American attempt, to install a very Russian-friendly Ukrainian leader somehow during that election. And that, of course, would play to Russia's favor, because then Ukraine really would become a puppet of Russia.
All right, Elizabeth Palmer with the latest. Thank you for that.